Sato ma satgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya Aviravirmaheti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. I don't know, a few years ago, I think I spoke here on Narada's story, and even if you don't remember, that's fine. I'm sure that topic will come up again. But that story Tulsidas mentions in his book about why the Rama Avatara occurred. One of the things in Tulsidas Ramayana we see is that it begins with the marriage of Shiva. And one of the interesting things in that description is that the first deity Shiva worships there is Ganesha. And this is at his wedding ceremony. And that doesn't make sense chronologically. Normally we think about Ganesha as Shiva's son. And how would he be worshipping Ganesha at the start of his wedding ceremony? And therefore it's good to remember that all of these deities have two dimensions. So there is this dimension in mythology or history, whichever way you think of. You think in terms of Rama, Krishna, we'll call it history. You think about Shiva and Durga and others. We don't consider them as historical figures, but they are part of mythology, Purana. And so, from that perspective, of course, Ganesha is Shiva's son. But Ganesha has an eternal aspect. And so that Ganesha is always present. And therefore, in all our worships, we begin with worshipping Ganesha. Ganesha is seen as a Vigna Harta, one who removes all obstacles. So Shiva plays an important role in Ramayana, although it's a story of Rama, because traditionally Shiva and Rama are seen as Shiva meditates on Rama and Rama meditates on Shiva. So they are each other's Ishta, which is a very unusual way to put it. So there is this nice story, and many of you would have heard about it, how Shiva and his wife was known as Uma, the Divine Mother, Uma. So she was a daughter of Brahma, Prajapati. And Shiva is a character which is very unusual from other Hindu deities. We find most of the Hindu deities kind of very fine ornaments and gold and weapons and very kind of you'll find that commonalities in Hindu deities. Shiva is unusual because there are no ornaments, there are no gold and big, nothing which is similar to Vishnu or the other deities that they're there. In fact, it's so much in contrast that instead of the ornaments, Shiva has a snake as a necklace, a poisonous snake. Then among the different creatures around him are scorpions and all kinds of animals which none of us would want to have around us. We heard of, you were speaking about having cats and dogs as pets. I never heard of anyone having scorpion as pets. And then Shiva, according to the story, is connected with Shiva. He's not staying in some fine Vaikuntha palace or anything like that. He's kind of haunting ground, seems to be the cremation grounds. And he's kind of all these ashes laden and stuff. So he's not the kind of person anyone would want to have as a son-in-law. And so, obviously, Uma's parents were not thrilled that she wanted to marry this very unusual person. But she was determined, and so they couldn't stop her. But it was always a bit of an embarrassment for them. to have this kind of a son-in-law. So when they had these very hi-fi parties at home, and nobody would invite the son-in-law because then they would have to introduce him to others, and that would be an embarrassment. And so it so happened that in Prajapati's home, there this some big event, and all the celestial beings and all the devas and devis were invited for that. And of course, no invitation was sent to Shiva. And he's happy. He's not waiting for an invitation. He's just meditating on Kailash, sitting there. Then Uma kind of looks out of the window, and then she sees all these divine chariots going towards her father's home. And then she gets the news that there is some big event being held. And she just feels like, oh, but we didn't receive any invitation. But still, it's her own home, that's her father's home. So she goes to Shiva and says, let's go. There is some big event going to occur in there. And Shiva is like, no, there is no invitation. I'm not going to go. And then he tells her, since they are not invited, it's better that you don't go to. But she's curious and she said, it's my own father in my own place. So I don't need an invitation to visit my own home. So in spite of Shiva's reservations about that, she does go for that event. And then we read that there are all these assigned seats for all these specially invited guests. And she is horrified to find that not only have they not invited her and her husband, but there were no even seat reservation done for them. And that's a great insult, a great humiliation. And so we read that she is so heartbroken that in that fire sacrifice that was being done, she just jumps into that and self-immolation takes place. She just dies. And when this news, and of course she didn't go alone, there was the other retinue who went with her. When they get the news here in Kailash that all this has happened, then Shiva's people, they go, and the Virabhadra, one of the great attendants of Shiva, he go and they are so mad at this, they just disrupt that whole gathering, they break everything and do all kinds of things. And Shiva is heartbroken when the news reaches him. And so when he goes there into that great grief and anger, Shiva takes that dead body of Uma and puts it on his shoulders. And then he starts this big Tandava. Tandava is this big fierce dance of Shiva. The whole earth starts trembling. And of course, if it's going to be destruction of this whole creation, then all these gods, then their only refuge is Vishnu, and they go to him and then say, do something, otherwise everything is coming to an end. And just pay attention to these gods, because Tulsidas refers to them in the Ramayana quite often. And so then they go and say, just save us. And then that time, Shiva comes and, Vishnu comes and he sees Shiva is doing this fierce dance and with that grief, with this Uma's body. And then he recognizes immediately, as long as the body is in front of him, his grief and anger is not going to go. So somehow, and so we read that with that discuss Sudarshan Chakra, it sounds very cruel. He just, of course, it's a dead body, so he just slices that body and falls into 51 pieces. And those pieces fall in different places on the earth. But they were the parts of a Divine Mother's body. So each place where that part fell became a Shakti Pita. That's why we have these 51 temples devoted to the goddess. And if you have been to any of them, you will see, if you read up, that each of the temple they'll say specifically which part of the body fell there. And all of these are considered very powerful places where the presence of the mother is very strongly felt and the prayers are answered and so on. And so a lot of people go to these places. But the incident I want to mention about Uma and Parvati, Uma and Shiva, and just to kind of conclude that part of the story, and it is then afterwards, then only after that, that body of Uma is sliced into 51 pieces, and then Shiva's anger comes down, calms down the earth, and the Srishti creation is protected. And then Uma is reborn, takes a birth again, and again vows to marry Shiva. And that time she's born as Parvati, that's the daughter of Himalaya. And she does again austerities, and then she marries Shiva again. And at that time, her austerities were so severe that she spends a lot of time even not eating food. Sometimes she just for a while she just lives eating the leaves of trees, and then she even stops eating the leaves. And that's why one of the Divine Mother's name is Aparna. Parna is leaf, so one who is not even eating the leaves. So all of these different names of the Devis you will see. Again, there are stories connected to each other. There's hundreds of stories about this. But the incident I want to mention about Sati, Uma or Sati, she's called because she immolated herself. So she always saw that Shiva was to meditate on Rama all the time. And so she one day says, why do you meditate on Rama? You are Mahadeva, you are the great God. You are the supreme being. You are the ideal. You are everything. And you are the renouncer. You have renounced everything. You have no attachments. And look at that Rama. And that time, Rama had already taken birth as a son of Dashratha. And Sita had been taken away by Ravana. And then we see Rama was just heartbroken. And in the descriptions we find in the book is he's going in every tree and every creeper asking, have you seen her? Just shedding tears. And so she's seeing all this from Kailas. And she's saying, he's just like an ordinary person, a family person. There is a bereavement. His wife has been stolen and he's crying. And what's so great about him? And you are meditating on him and you are the supreme God. And then Shiva says, don't say that. She's in this. And she says, no, I'm going to go and test him. And Shiva just discourages her. But she's like, no, I want to know why is he so worthy of your meditation? And then she comes down on the earth. She goes to that forest where Rama is going to the forest, looking for Sita, searching for her everywhere. And that time, this Uma, or Sati as she was called, she takes the form of Sita. So she says, he'll be happy. He's searching for Sita, and she takes the form of Sita and goes. And so Rama is coming from the other side, and here this Uma in the form of Sita comes from the opposite side. But contrary to her expectations, Rama doesn't seem to have become excited. He's looking for Sita and there's Sita coming in front. But when she comes, Rama bows down to her and says, oh, Divine Mother, where have you come in this so early in the morning? What are you searching for? And that time she saw that he was not just an ordinary human being crying for the loss of his wife. That he could see, no one would have known that it is this Uma taking the form of Sita. But he could see. And then she looked around and then she saw everywhere in the sky, in the trees, in the creepers, everywhere she could see the reflection of Rama. And then she understood. And now I know why Shiva meditates on Rama. So her doubts are resolved. She goes back to Kailash and tells Shiva, now I understand why you meditate on this. So my problem is solved. But then Shiva tells her, your problem is solved, but you have created a different problem for me. And that is, he said, you took the form of Sita, and I look upon Sita as my mother. So now that you have taken her form, I can no longer look upon you as my wife, because you took the form of my mother, even if for a short time. And then that is why with this other incident occurred, that to go into the father's place, and then she died, and that's how she had to be born again and become Parvati and so on. So this the relationship between Shiva and Rama is very important. That's why sometimes in many Indian families, at least in the earlier generation, the name Shivaram was very common to connect Shiva and Rama. If we come to the end of the story, towards the end of the story, when, of course, there's this big war, the kind of a climax of the story is this battle between Rama and Ravana. That time we read that while this battle, which went on for days, a number of days, all these gods, these citizens of heaven, were up in the sky watching what's going on. It's not very different from, again, I'm not probably trivializing it a little bit, but it's like when there is an election here. People are wanting to see who wins, because the direction in which the country would go would depend on who wins. And so, in the same way, this war between Ram and Ravan is going on. So, from the heaven, all these devas are watching to see, because the future of what helps for them and for the world will depend on who wins from this. And so, Tulsidas says, normally in Indian context, whichever side you are in, you will say, oh, this person Jai or that other person Jai. So these devas on from heaven, they're simply saying Jai. They are not saying who's Jai. Because it's like they're sitting on fence. They don't know who is going to win. And the idea is, if you want to be on the winning side, then you just wait for the outcome and then decide. Now, so it's kind of good to pause here a little bit. So who are these devas? When people say that, oh, this person went to heaven or hell. So we know how we come into this world. There is the process when people are born. We know how the process occurs. So when people go to heaven, do they like drop from the sky and just like suddenly find in the heaven, or what it is? And the general consensus is that just like we are born here, they are born in heaven. In other words, we have a set of parents in heaven or already staying in heaven, and we are born there. And if they are citizens of heaven, if they're born there, we automatically by birth, if you're born there, you become citizens there too. But who are the people who go to heaven? And the general understanding is that people who have lived good lives, knowing that if you do good things in life, you will be rewarded. There is this concept of papa and punya. It is a good, meritorious act. And if you do something bad, then you will suffer in hell. If you do something good, you will go to heaven. So clearly, if every time I do some good action, at the back of my mind is this thought, I'm going to be rewarded for it. It's like in your workplace. When you work hard, it's good to just ask, if you're practicing karma yoga or thinking of yourself as a spiritual person, what is it that is motivating me to work hard, to work efficiently in the workplace? And even if there is the slightest tinge, oh, my boss might appreciate the work I'm doing, or this might be helpful for me to get a promotion, or maybe make some more money, or kind of embellish my resume a little bit. Now, all those things, in itself, there is nothing criminal or wrong about that. But if there is this desire, there is certain motivation behind it. So that good work that I do will yield some benefit. And one of the benefits of good work is accumulation of punya, which kind of is like the kind of currency that works in heaven, which will take me to heaven. So most of the people who go to heaven are people who are good people, but people who desire rewards, who desire to be appreciated for what they have done, who desire to be compensated for the good things they have done. And that compensation is for themselves. So there is, even in goodness, even in doing good things, there is a subtle form of selfishness involved. Even if I'm doing good, but yes, I'm doing some good to the world, but I'm expecting that somehow that will make me happy, both here, and again, it's not just about heaven. Think about it this way. If there is a homeless person or if there is a hungry person, and you give something to that hungry person, what is it that motivates us to help the needy? And again, there is no one answer to that, but all of us have to look inside our heart and ask that question. And sometimes it could be that, oh, when I help somebody, I feel good about it. Or I feel less guilty that there is so much food at my home. Here is this hungry person, and I feel that it's not fair. So I give some food to that hungry person. And then a little bit of my guilt or a little feel of uneasiness I feel in my heart goes away. So the question is, who is being helped here? Yes, I'm helping the person, but I'm also helping myself. I'm trying to remove that little bit of guilt or uneasiness in my own heart. And of course, there could be additional things like, oh, people will know that how charitable I am, how generous I am. Or even further, oh, this is a good meritorious act. I'm kind of accumulating punya, and then this will take me to heaven. So there is an inherent form of selfishness involved, even when people are doing good things. And is that the same people are going to be born in heaven and become these different gods? So there are really, again, not to make it too complicated, but the Upanishads sometimes speak about karma devas and ajana devas, which really mean those people who have gone to heaven as a result of good karma done here, and those people who are being born and reborn in heaven for a much longer time than just a one-time birth in heaven and be reborn again as human beings. But I'm saying all this to emphasize, even these devas, if they were totally selfless and this thing, then they would have been enlightened, they would have attained moksha. So they've gone to a better place, but there was a little bit of selfishness. And therefore, when there is war between Ram and Ravan is going on, what they want to know is, we don't want the privileges we have in heaven to be taken away from us. So we should not be backing the losing side. That's why they're simply saying Jai. They're not saying who's Jai. Again, kind of just pause a little bit further here and then see what is it that we value in life. Because there could be situations where I get to benefit, or I or my family gets the benefit of it. But in the process, there is a larger community or a country can be at a loss. Or I serve the country, do what is good for the larger whole, even if in the process my family has to suffer. And so what are the kind of choices people make in life? Again, we might find reflections on that in the political systems, even in democracies the world over. The kind of choices the elected representatives make. Is it done to benefit them and their family or their businesses, or it benefit the country as a whole? And so similar situation occurs even with these devas, that what they want to preserve is their privileges in heaven, and not so much about whether it's good for the world or not. So if Ravan wins the war, they'll go and sing praises to Ravan and say, make sure that our privileges remain intact. You can do whatever else you want in the world. Anyway, so that's the scenario Tulsidas presents. The Devas are saying Jai Jai, but not saying who's Jai it is. And that time Tulsidas hints at this, that if we want to be spiritual seekers, then going to heaven is a very selfish goal in some ways. That is not, going to heaven is not liberation. That is why the Gita says that Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punaravartino Arjuna. Even going to that highest heaven, people have to be reborn here again. Now, that applies to most people. Why I say most people? So let's say if there is some sincere spiritual seeker, and clearly, if you're a spiritual seeker by definition, you're a good person. You have been helping people and you're doing good things. But maybe you've done a lot of good things, but you haven't realized God yet. And then eventually you die without having realized God. But you're still a good person. And therefore you will go to heaven as a result of the good things you have done. But if you are a sincere spiritual seeker, then when you go to heaven, and of course, heaven, the way the descriptions find, there'll be maybe a lot of somras there, and a lot of singing and dancing and everything. If we are getting distracted in this world and not able to meditate, forget about meditating in heaven. The distractions there are a million times much more than here. If we cannot withstand the temptations here, nothing you can do in heaven. But if someone is a sincere spiritual seeker, and if that person dies without realizing God, even when they go to heaven, they will not be tempted by all the joys and the pleasures that heaven can offer. Even in heaven, then they'll find some quiet spot under some tree and continue to do their sadhana, continue to do meditation. And whatever little was remaining, the unfinished part, because of which they couldn't be enlightened, they'll become enlightened from there itself. And they won't have to be born again. So sometimes this way of being liberated is called Krama Mukti, a mukti in gradually. That you have gone there, you continue and finish the remaining part, and then you get liberated. But everyone else, if I go to heaven and instead of saying, oh, now no meditation for the next few days, then of course, because no matter how much good I have done in this world, it's still a limited quantity. And therefore, the joys I'll get will also be limited. It's not like, people might speak about everlasting in heaven. Nothing is everlasting. So it will end. When it ends, we have to come back again. And so these devas, during the war between Ram and Ravan, they are just saying Jai, Jai, but not saying who's Jai. It is. And the story goes on to say that they say that Ravana had 10 heads. So one of the names of Ravana is Kashandana. Anana is a face, and so 10 heads. And sometimes in some storybooks or in TV version, you will say actually something. I don't know, it's difficult to fit those 10 heads. They somehow, it looks very bizarre. But it was not actually like 10, literally 10 heads. Now in mythology, sometimes they use language of symbols. It's very symbolical. And one thing, he was very intelligent, very smart, Ravana. He was a great devotee of Shiva. But head is also a symbol of the ego. So extremely egoistic. So if one head can hold one ego, 10 head means he was really very bloated ego he had. In fact, it is said that when he goes to Kailash, many of you been to Kailash? So anyway, I was lucky to have gone there almost 25 years ago. And so near Kailash, there is this wonderful lake called the Manas Sarovar. And it is said, is believed there that gods go and take a dip there. And so it's a very pristine, pure lake. It's wonderful there. But next to that, there's another lake. It's called the Rakshastal. And it is believed that that is where Ravana took bath before he went to have darshan of Shiva in Kailash. And these two lakes are connected, except that the Rakshasthal is actually a few feet below uh, the Manas Sarovar. So water from the Manas Sarovar flows into that lake, but that water cannot come into this because it is a lower altitude. And so really, in one sense, even the water in the Rakshasthal is the same water in the Manas Sarovar. But this association that Ravan bathed there, no one wants to go and bathe into that river. Well, Manas Sarovar, everyone wants to go and take a dip. So when Ravan goes there to have darshan of Shiva, and Shiva is Idishta, he meditates on Shiva all the time. So he goes and he takes a bath in that lake, and then he sees Shiva that meditating. And he wants, normally, in the Indian tradition, we have the disciple, the student, putting his head on the feet of the Guru. So he wants to touch his head on the feet of Shiva. And so normally, when people bow down, they bow down and touch their head on the feet. But this is Ravan, he is not like the normal person. So he says, instead of me bending down, I'm going to lift that whole of Kailash and take it towards my head and put it like this. And so he puts his arm under this Kailash. And Shiva, of course, he knows everything. So Shiva notices this great devotee has come. But he's so egoistic, he will not bow down, he won't bend. So in that sitting way itself, Shiva then presses his big toe on the ground. And then Ravana's hand kind of gets crushed in this. Not destroyed, but kind of he's not able to lift him. And then Ravana sings a big hymn, and that's become very famous now. And he sings that, and of course, one of the names of Shiva is Ashutosha. Ashu means quickly, Tosha means happy. So Shiva becomes happy very quickly. You don't need to make some big offerings. But simple thing with devotion, even if you offer a little bit of water or a bilva leaf, he's happy. And very generous. So a lot of times Shiva has given boons to all these Rakshasas. And later on they have created nuisance of themselves. So anyway, so Ravan then sings this hymn, and then Shiva is pleased and releases him and makes him understand his mistake. But still, there's a lot of ego in Ravan. So in the Ram and Ravan's final battle, the Rama is kind of shooting at these heads of Ravana, and one by one they are going. But Ravana is still not dying. Because they are all expecting Rama and telling Rama, you should hit at his heart. That's where you should hit. And Rama is unable to pierce Ravana's heart. Like, so why? Why can't Rama do it? And then the explanation is that when he looks at Ravana's heart, and Ravana has such desire for Sita, to possess Sita, that in Ravana's heart he sees Sita. Now when he sees Sita, in Sita's heart he sees Rama. And in Rama's heart he sees this whole world, entire creation. So shooting an arrow there would mean this end of the whole world. And that's the explanation that he was hesitating to do it. And then the Devas go, they sing a hymn, and then somehow, and then that's the end of Ravana, and the story kind of ends. It doesn't really end, and there is lots of interesting variations we find there. One of the things which raises some question marks is about Agni Pariksha of the Sita. That when Sita then upward lived in Ashokvana, that place where Ravana had kept her, that when she comes back, some people, human nature is such, they were raising doubts that she has lived for so long there in Lanka. How do we know that she has not been violated there? There's an interesting one event which occurs before, that one thing that Ravana did was never touched her throughout. In fact, in the Tamil version of the Ramayana, and the Valmiki version is quite brutal in some ways. In just Ravana just as soon as she crosses that lane, Ravana just lifts her up, throws her on his shoulders, and he goes. It's pretty brutal and can be very disorienting to devotees to think of Ravana doing that to Sita. But some of these other Ramayanas which have come, the Kamba Ramayana in Tamil, um, is a devotee. Both is Tulsidas and others are devotees. And so the way they have visualized the scene. So in Kamba Ramayana it says Ravana lifted her, the whole area on which she was standing, along with that ground he lifted her. So throughout this whole episode, he never even touches her. And someone then asked Ravan once that she hates you, but you have all the powers. Why don't you take the form of Rama and go to her rather than endure this Ravana form? And then Ravana says, see, any of these deities, when they had these powers, to take a form, you have to meditate on that form. And so Ravana is reported to have said, to take Rama's form, I have to meditate on Rama. And if I meditate on Rama, I don't want anything. I just want Rama. And so that's not going to work because I want Sita. So I can't take Rama's form. And so he would go often to that grove, that Ashokvana where she was kept, and try to persuade her to become his queen. And of course, there was no question that she is going to agree to that. In one of the visits of Ravan, there's this beautiful verse comes in Valmiki's Ramayana. She just picks up a blade of grass and tells Ravana, right now, at this very moment, I can destroy you to ashes. With this yogi power, I can just kill you. She said, but I heard my husband is coming. They are building a bridge there. And so she wanted to give credit to Rama to destroying this. And so something that Sita could have done herself easily without all this so much trouble of building a bridge and all of that. So she doesn't do it. In fact, sometimes in the books they say the power of God's name, that taking Rama's name, Hanuman could leap across the ocean and go. But Rama himself had to build a bridge to go there. And to sometimes to emphasize the power embedded in God's name, to show that it's even more powerful than God himself. And that's why those of us who repeat the mantra that our Guru has given us have to remember that. There's a tremendous amount of power embedded in that. It's not just a few words. And if we recognize that and repeat the mantra with faith, with regularity, with devotion, it can completely change. But there has to be this deep faith, because everything begins with faith. The Upanishad begins, the Kathopanishad says the begins Shraddha Avivesha. Faith entered into Nachiketa. So with faith, everything becomes powerful. Everything is filled with meaning. Without faith, just becomes just a ritual. And so sometimes the obstacles that we have in our practice of prayer and meditation is the not sufficient growth of faith. People might think that they are being very rational, logical. Questioning is good, but just questioning for the sake of questioning, unless it is backed up by this deep faith. Now, how would we distinguish faith from, because faith is a word that kind of gets used so often in life. Oh, I have faith in this, I have faith in that. But that kind of faith, it's like, oh, I've lost faith in this. People have faith, and if something doesn't happen the way we want it, they immediately lose faith. So Shraddha is not that, which can come and go like power outage. There is no such thing as a faith outage. So deep faith means once it enters, it never leaves. That doesn't mean that one doesn't have to question. Yes, one can question all their lives if they want, but that faith will never go. It's almost like a gut feeling. It's a little bit like you know God exists, but that knowledge is not an intellectual process. It's not something you have intellectually reasoned out. You have had no experience of God. You have no evidence. If your friend says, "What proof do you have?" Lots of people kind of think they are a big deal. Or, what is the evidence you have got? Of course, you don't have any evidence. So, no evidence, no experience, nothing. But somewhere deep down, you know God exists. That is faith. That it's something that you can never shake off, although having no proof or no evidence. And it's not intellectual, it's not simply an emotional response. When that happens, it'll never go away. And that is what supports our japa, prayer, and meditation. Because without that, it's very difficult to sustain. People can get skeptical. People can question, like, what am I doing? It makes sense. You do it for a few days, you find nothing happens. Then you begin to question, like, let me try something else. And that's this lack of faith. And so there is a lot that we can think about. So when going across that bridge, so they say that Rama's name was so powerful. And so that's why Sita could have actually finished Ravana, but she didn't. And then, of course, people then kept on still questioning. And so the general feeling is that to silence people, that this is a unfounded speculation that she was violated when she was in Ravana's custody. They had this Agni Pariksha to show that, well, if that was true, then she won't survive. But if she's pure, then even fire cannot do anything to her. So there is another backstory to that. And in Tulsidas, what Tulsidas says is that sometime in the forest, even these avatars, they don't, it's kind of a wonderful intermixture of the human and the divine. So that's why it's very difficult to pin down whether Krishna or Rama, were they human beings or were they God? Sometimes with the things they do, they just seem like human beings, human way of doing things. And in some things they do, it's like, no, an ordinary human being can't do that. Only God can do that. So you have this kind of an interplay between that. So we see that in the life of Rama as well. And so when Rama was in the forest with Ram, Lakshmana and Sita, and for some time you're just thinking, I'm Dashrath's son, my father asked me to go to the forest, I'm here, and every day he'll go hunting, he'll bring something, and Sita will cook, and they say 14 years we have to live there. But the reason this Mahavishnu had taken birth was to, again, when adharma becomes increased, dharma goes down, that's why avatar comes. So this Ravana and others were actually disturbing the world harmony. And so the reason Vishnu took birth as Rama was to destroy Ravana. But after getting into this world, he just forgot that. And so in the forest then, these emissaries from up above, they come and remind him, wait a minute, you are not simply Dashratha's son. You have this big mission for which you were born. And then they say, for this mission ahead now, it is important that Sita be protected. And so this Agni appears there and says, let Sita be entrusted in the in the care of Agni Devata, fire. And she will be returned after the mission is complete. So the real Sita enters into the fire when they were in forest. And what comes out was kind of they say Maya Sita, kind of a shadow Sita, not the real Sita. So the whole Ramayana which occurs after that point, Sita is actually not even present there. It's just the shadow of Sita. And so after this whole battle is over, after Ravana is killed, now of course Rama knows this has happened. So this is not the real Sita. And so the only way to get the real Sita back was to have this thing like, let's have Agni Pariksha done. And so this Maya Sita goes in and then the real Sita. So sometimes people see this whole test in fire as a way of getting back the real Sita. So there are many different versions, many different ways to understand what may or may not have happened. Yeah. So as I was saying in the beginning, Ramayana is like a big ocean. You can dip into it anywhere and some wonderful things will come. So we had a chance in these last 3 talks that we had kind of refer to some of the incidents, some of the backstories, some of the lessons that come from it. And even if you know the story of Rama, I would encourage you to kind of revisit that story and try to go into it a little bit more deeply. Because yes, the TV version of Ramanand Sagar might be interesting and our Chitra Katha might be also interesting. But they just kind of touch the superficial layers. But if you want to really derive benefit from the deeper nuances behind every character in the Ramayana story and every incident, it'll be helpful if you want. A lot of commentaries are there to read about Rama or listen to some people who expound the Ramayana and do it in a much better way. So we still have about 10 minutes. So if there is something you want to share or some incident from Ramayana that you like, or if you have some questions, feel free.
Ravana was a great, knowledgeable soul. And he knew what he's doing. And to get to ultimate liberation, he thought that it's the only way if he can get killed by Rama. So, and to get Rama to kill him, he took Sita away, and that was the certain way of getting to the war and then to...
Yeah, there is that backstory there that there were these 2 doorkeepers, gatekeepers in Vaikuntha, and then they did some indiscretion and they were going to be punished. And they were given a choice that they have to take a large number of births as devotees again before getting back their job in Vaikuntha, or be born as 3 times as the enemy of God and they can be restored. And so then they chose like, well, it will be quicker. And so they chose 3 times. So in one birth he came as Hiranyakashipu, the other one as Ravan, the third as I think Shishupal, Krishna. So therefore, sometimes they say there are different kinds of bhakti, that devotion can manifest in many different ways. And so a lot of these so-called demons, etc., that we find, many of them, they fought with these avatars and all of that, but they were all liberated. It just doesn't make sense. And the idea is again to show the God is such a embodiment of purity that even if you're thinking about God through hatred or fear, like Kamsa was theorizing all the time of fear, and he wanted to destroy Krishna. But that made him think of Krishna all the time. So it's like if you go into the rain, you're going to get wet. If you go out into the rain happily or if you're miserable, it doesn't make any difference. You're going to get wet. So if you're all the time thinking of God, you're thinking of God through love or through hatred, you're still thinking of God. So that connection with the divine can purify you and make you liberated. And so one of the ways that devotion manifests, they call it Vairi Bhakti, looking upon God as your father, as your mother, as your friend, as your beloved, but looking upon God as your enemy. So it's considered one of the forms of bhakti, but I don't recommend it. But to show that thinking of God is beneficial no matter how we do it. Yeah, Zachary? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So yesterday you had mentioned like the heart and like bring like how these characters relate to the heart, right? How do you actually get your heart to expand to like include Rama and his brother? You know,
So I think I briefly mentioned yesterday that we have these three hearts. There is the anatomical heart, which pumps the blood and all of that. There is heart as a seat of emotions. When we feel overwhelmed with some emotion, we feel a heaviness here. We just feel something here. So heart is also seen as the seat of emotions. But there is also the spiritual heart. So when we are asked to meditate, we are actually expected to meditate in the spiritual heart. Now, we don't know where the spiritual heart is. All that we know is it's in this area. So it's like, if you've never been to the Vedanta Center here, then, but you know it's in Monroeville, correct? So you know it's in Monroeville. So you know the kind of moralist area it is in, but then you just have to come and try to go on street by street and find out where it is. It's like hearts is like that. We kind of know more or less where it is, but we need to then discover that spiritual heart. Which is the reason when we begin meditating in the beginning, we close our eyes, we do everything, and then we just see darkness. Because if God is present in my heart, and if I look in my heart, I should see God. Why am I seeing darkness? It's because I'm not really seeing in the right place. Where I have not yet discovered what that spiritual heart is. And the way to discover that spiritual heart is through a purity of life. Living with certain values, certain principles, living honestly, truthfully, helping others with no negative feelings like hatred, anger, malice, jealousy. If I can live that way, then it's almost like if I'm driving and the windshield of my car is cloudy and this thing, I can't see anything. So if I clean the windshield, then I can drive. So similarly, the windshield of my mind is cloudy, I can't see. And so that cleanliness, that can come through the practice of karma yoga, the different yogas through devotion and so on. And then I discover that. So the first, even before we see God in our heart, first we must discover that spiritual heart. And when in the early Vedic period, when the student went to the teacher's place, the first thing that the student was taught was the Gayatri prayer. It's one of the most ancient prayers in the Vedic tradition. And the purpose of that prayer, it's not addressed to any specific deity, but it's the Dhiyo Yonav Prachodayat, the Dhi. The Dhi is that refined power. It's actually that spiritual power. So we have a mind, we have the intellect, but right now what we are using is maybe just 1% of that intellect. As one of our Swamis used to say, that if someone can find access even to just 5 or 10% of the powers of our mind, you will be considered a genius in the world. You might get a Nobel Prize. You will do wonderful things. Just 10%. But that's nowhere near enough to realize God. In order to realize God, we must have access to complete 100% of the potentiality of the mind. And therefore, it's possible to be a genius in the world and yet be an infant, a beginner in spiritual life. So the great scholarship itself is no guarantee that one is a highly advanced spiritual seeker. And so that opening of that heart comes through living a life of clarity, purity, and so on. Then when we try to see God, think of God, we'll actually feel, not just feel, we'll actually see the divine there. And so that once you see there, and then you see that space, the space of the heart occupied, from our present perception looks like only such a small place here. But once you actually see that you see, it's almost like the the Alice in Wonderland kind of a thing. You apparently go down the rabbit hole, which might look very small, but once you go in there, then you find there is so much in there. So the spiritual heart is like that. Right now, it just seems like a very limited place. How can anybody, even I can't fit there? What to speak about the Lord and the whole creation and all of that? But once you have access to that, then you see that that spatial dimension is at a completely different dimension than our this space. And to give a rather crude example would be, we know that suppose you need to store 100 books or 100 copies or 200 copies, need certain shelf space and all of that. But today is in a digitally, in a small iPad or even in a phone, you can store any number of books. So apparently it just seems like such a small little device, and normally we think storing of books might need a larger space. So the appearance of a smaller space need not necessarily mean that I can't store something big there. And spiritual heart is a little bit like
Thank you.
that. Yeah. So thank you very much. So we had a chance to study this Ramayana a little bit, and as I was saying earlier, if you can find an opportunity to look at this more deeply, and of course Mahabharata if you can, which is even a much bigger book. But there is no need to do too much reading, but wherever your heart longs for, with the story of Rama or Krishna or Buddha or Ramakrishna, take up one thing and kind of go deep into it. And then there is something substantial will be gained by that. Otherwise, just superficial knowledge of 100 things, not much helpful. So it's my prayer to the infinite grace of Rama, Sita, Lakshman, Hanuman, and everyone, all the great ones, all the prophets, all the incarnations of all the traditions of the past and future. May their grace be upon us, and then may our hearts be enlightened through their blessings. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Alright. We have a singer who will sing a few songs.
Oh,
Surabhi.
sure, come on.
मन हरण भाव भयदारुणम् नव कंज लोचन कंज मुख कर कंज पद कंजारुणम् श्रीराम 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 कंदर्प अगणित अमित छवि नवनील नीरज सुंदरम पटतीत मानव तड़ित रुचि शुचि नौमि जनक सुतारम श्रीराम श्रीराम भज दीन बंधु दिनेश दानव दैत्य वंश निकंदनम रघुनंदन कंद कौशल चंद दशरथ नंदनम श्रीराम श्रीराम सिर मुकुट कुंडल तिलक चारु दारु अंग विभूषणम आजानु भुज शर चाप धर संग्राम जित खर दूषणम श्रीराम 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 इति वदति तुलसीदास शंकर शेष मुनि मनरंजनम मम हृदय कंज निवास कुरु कामादि खलदल गंजनम श्रीरामचंद्र कृपालु भज मन हरण भव भयदारुणम् नव कंज लोचन कंज मुख कर कंज पद कंजारुणम् श्रीराम 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 सुंदर ध्यान उभे विटवारे सुंदर ध्यान उभे विटवारे सुंदर ध्यान करकटावरी करकटावरी हे मुनिया सुंदर ध्यान उभे विटवारी सुंदर ध्यान तुलसी हार गा गुनियन में बैठ गुण गावे, गुनियन में बैठ गुण गावे, गुनियन में बैठ गुण गावे। जो मन लागे गुरु चरणन में, जो मन लागे गुरु चरणन में, रिझावे सब जन मन को गुनी यन में बैठ गुण गावे, गुनियन में बैठ गुण गावे। सत सुरन श्रुतियन संगत सत सुरन श्रुतियन संगत गृह, हंसनास रस राग भेद, ज्योति रंग रूप जावे, गुनियन में बैठ गुण गावे, गुनियन में बैठ गुण गावे। गुनि गरे गरे सनि धनि ग म गरे स गरे म ग ब म ग म गरे सनि स नि रे ग म ब ग ब म ग ब म गरे ग म ब ग म ध नि रे ग ब म ग ग ग म म ध ग ग नि रे ग ब प म ग म ध नि रे ग रे स ग ग रे रे स स नि रे ग ब म ध नि रे ग रे स नि रे ग ब म गरे ग ग रे स। गुनियन में बैठ गुण गावे, गुनियन में बैठ गुनियन में बैठ गुनियन में बैठ गुण Thank you,